The president's intent was to stay in power at all costs.
This election,
I swore an oath. I'm not going to break it. I'm not putting on no stinking circus.
They put their faith in Donald Trump, and he deceived them.
Donald Trump is going to be the defendant and the candidate.
This is the third criminal case brought against the former president this year.
This was not quite the return to Washington this former president had envisioned for himself.
For the first time in American history, a president charged with crimes in office.
Tensions are still high following the chaos at the Capitol.
Tim Heaphy was the chief investigator. A former U.S. attorney, Heaphy led the independent review of the violence in Charlottesville in 2017. They conducted more than 1,000 interviews, reviewed millions of documents, thousands of hours of video evidence. From the beginning, Trump denounced the committee.
The committee issued a subpoena to none other than former President Trump himself.
He refused to cooperate, and while many of his aides did testify, others followed his lead. The committee's final report spans 692 pages.
One of the symbols of Southern resistance to voting rights and equal opportunity was the Confederate battle flag. And to see that flag being waged by many of the protesters brought back those memories.
When he saw rioters storm the Capitol carrying the Confederate battle flag, essentially trying to take away the votes of the American people. That, I know, affected him profoundly, and certainly was a driving factor in the way that he led the Select Committee.
Donald Trump lost the presidential election in 2020. Don't believe me? Hear what his former Attorney General had to say about it.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bull.
Bill Barr, who had been hated by the left and who had been beloved by Trump all the way until December of 2020.
Most of the footage we are about to play has never been seen. The Select Committee obtained it as a part of our investigation.
hold the line! Hold the line! Hold the line! We have a breach of the Capitol! Breach of the Capitol!
We can't hold this, we're gonna get too many people. Look at this display, man.
We lost the line! We lost the line! All MPDs, get back! All MPDs, get back up to the upper deck! All MPDs, get back to the upper deck!
People who are sworn to protect the Capitol come to work on that day to do just that, and they are assaulted.
The attack on our Capitol was not a spontaneous riot. President Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. I will do everything I can to ensure the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office.
Tremendously sad day. Insurrectionists have stormed the U.S. Capitol, and they have been cheered on by the president.
Trump has been seen laughing and smiling as his wicked evil plans seem to keep on working despite how unpalatable they are for a majority of citizens, many of whom may be seen to be frowning at his treachery. What does it take for us to turn the Trump criminal secret police around? It's not really America first, but Trump International first. With this peace board attempted takeover, he always references his higher efficiency, which is exactly what Hitler was championing before he caused his country to be destroyed by angering opposition around his borders. We know Trump made pretense that Biden stole the election from him, and if his supporters didn't fight like hell, they wouldn't have a country anymore. He turned them into willing criminals for Trump. He had them so seduced by his wealth and power of persuasion that they went to the Capitol to do criminal trespass and destruction, violence and even murder, in the citadel of their own democracy, the very heart of what is truly the country that they could freely rejoice in. Trump wanted to fake some extra 11,000 votes that he was short. He was trying to rig and steal the election, and he accused Biden-Harris of doing that. He disclaimed blame for the rush on the Capitol, even though he is on record for egging his white supremacist crowd on. Certainly it seems a momentous challenge to hold Trump culpable, as he keeps on busting loose and breaking free with wild assertions and even breaking the justice system. He has even said, sometimes you need a dictator, but a massive majority of U.S. citizens do not want him to force himself onto all the citizens like a rapist. No, Donald, we never need a dictator. Jack Smith reassures that since the attack on our Capitol, The Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. Republicans in Congress, led by Senator Mitch McConnell, wouldn't support forming a commission that might go after Trump. We all went through madness as the leading candidate for president was a scofflaw rabble-rouser who stirred up a mob to attack the Capitol and threaten his own Vice President Mike Pence, all the while pretending it was a fun game show with him as the master of ceremonies. He was guilty of much more than merely saying that the election was rigged. He led on a wildly antagonized mob to an event that left destruction and a number of officers injured or dead without any justification at all whatsoever other than personal greed. Congress could not agree upon forming a bipartisan commission to look into the causes of the attack. Sadly, the Congress seemed either hugger-mugger with Trump or impossibly ineffectual and clutching at straws. They had been attacked by a self-aggrandizing lunatic who is known as a malignant narcissist by psychiatric experts. He has shown rapid signs of pushing into megalomaniacal exertions with vindictive persecutions of anyone who was resisting his thrall. Nancy Pelosi couldn't get more than 2 Republicans to join the House Select Committee, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. Benny Thompson, Mississippi Democratic chairman of the committee, chose Liz Cheney for vice chair for her Republican credibility. An African-American liberal and a white female conservative balanced the leadership of the committee. They expected people to obey subpoenas from Congress and provide documents when requested. They spent 1.5 years examining the evidence. The committee knew they would need to persuade the majority that ganging up against democracy was not in anyone's best interest, and so they picked a former president of ABC over lawyers to present the case. The real problem, of course, is credibility and the holding of significant power in office. Popularity is one component, but by no means could that be the only important thing, even when it will most frequently be hugely significant. Liz Cheney felt she had to protect America from Donald Trump, who acts xenophobically as if he needs to protect America from the rise of colored people and foreigners. She asserts over multiple months, Donald Trump oversaw and coordinated a sophisticated plan to overturn the presidential election and prevent the transfer of presidential power. She goes on to outline that Donald Trump and his advisors knew that he had in fact lost the election, but despite this, you will see evidence that President Trump corruptly pressured state legislators and election officials to change election results. She pinpoints that President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Pence to act illegally likely violated 2 federal criminal statutes. These were not random, off-the-cuff impulsive actions from Trump, but the enactment of a strategy, a pattern, and a methodology. In our final hearings, you will hear how President Trump summoned a violent mob and directed them illegally to march on the United States Capitol.
We know that's the case is because we had a hand tally that showed the number of ballots matched what was counted. It gets spun up into this baseless theory, not an accident. It is meant to stir up people's anger.
It shows how frantic and desperate President Trump had become by that phone call. I think it shows how his demands were fully removed from any kind of evidence.
After weeks of trying to overturn the results of the election, his legal team has come up with nothing.
In the courts where evidence gets scrutinized, authenticated, and tested, they're getting hammered.
The president was failing in his attempts to reverse the election.
All but now ending the president's attempt to reverse his election loss.
The presidential election was officially over. The Electoral College had cast its vote. Joe Biden was the president-elect of the United States.
The Electoral College certified the election. His legal team and allies lost more than 50 challenges.
He should explicitly order martial law, create a special czar. The person they had in mind for this was Sidney Powell.
I don't think any of these people were providing the president with good advice.
The White House lawyers were insistent that the president shouldn't declare martial law to overturn the election or empower Sidney Powell.
You have no evidence that there was fraud in the election, and you've lost every case.
This could be Trump's last stand, and it's a time when he has specifically called on his supporters to arrive in D.C.
Trump tried to weaponize the Department of Justice against our own democracy.
He responded very quickly and said, essentially, that's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm just asking you to do is just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman.
And I'm going to be able to use that to give people political cover to do what I want them to do, which is to overturn the vote.
Mr. Eastman said to the president that there was both legal as well as historical precedent for the vice president to overturn the election. This is constitutional mischief.
Next, after a brief tribute to my mom, I'm going to have a nice change of scene to look for a feast of the delights of Central Park and all its natural glory, which she definitely appreciated, along with everybody else who love it so well. I'll finish my thoughts about the prosecution case against Trump insurrection against democracy on January the 6th, after which I read some analysis on gold price charts and what is impelling recent activity, but the volatility outpaced my reading, so staying attuned to high-level expert forecasters who can reveal the top motivations is the best way to remain assuredly confident with overall strategy. So now on with the serious indictments against Trump's badly flawed character, so checkered by greed and lust, with a seemingly insatiable desire for more power. Trump knew that there were no disparities in the tallying of all the legitimate votes. In fact, there was very high accuracy and minimal mistakes. Giuliani claimed 8,021 ballots from dead people, but apparently there were only 2 of those. Trump was repeatedly pushing to falsify the results of the election. While loudly denouncing Biden for voter fraud, he kept on pressurizing his staff to perjure themselves and lie about the ballot counting correctness. It's very shocking indeed that Trump wanted to intimidate and preferred to insistently assert his own power over and above true democratic principles, jurisprudence, and law. The main obvious subtext was a racist intention to determine that white supremacism would be the political leadership and not a more nicely balanced democracy. Certainly, we already have problems of social, economic injustice as it is, but Trump doubling down and inflicting his absolute dictatorship will not do anything to solve the problems we may be facing, although he has clearly asserted that it definitely will. He loves having absolute power over people, which he began to enjoy with his long-running TV show The Apprentice, in which he loved showing himself off as chairman of the board and firing people from his company. Judge Luttig wrote that the efforts by President Trump to overturn the 2020 election were the most reckless, insidious, and calamitous failures in both legal and political judgment in American history. Giuliani and Trump would repeat dozens of false allegations, and the committee believed they had evidence it wasn't an honest mistake. Giuliani ended up being sued in a civil case. The federal court ordered Giuliani to pay $146 million for defaming 2 black lady poll workers, besmirching their decent reputations with racist imputations. The former attorney for Donald Trump has filed for bankruptcy, being enthusiastic about white power at any cost, proved to be very costly for America's mayor in the end. I put in much effort this week to condense this edited take on the frontline presentation of this most serious undermining of the foundations of the security of the government system, because I believe that Trump has allowed himself to be fully seduced by the thrill of excess power abuse, a power that he already tried to hold on to illegitimately at the expense of some people's honorable lives. His second term of office has been paved by destruction of the East Wing of the White House, the First Lady's Wing, killings off the coast of Venezuela, and also in city of Minnesota. the same old backing of Putin as supposedly a decent, reasonable guy with whom he can deal, even while he kept carrying on his murderous destruction of civilian settlements, and the same old free pass long rope paid out to Netanyahu as he tries to fully exterminate all the Palestinians in Gaza so they can have their luxury coastal resort for rich Israelis and foreign Jews and their friends living up high where poor Palestinians used to live before they were murdered or chased away. The seeds and origins of all this extreme dishonesty go back a long way into historical recorded time, so it is possible and desirable for people to know the real truth instead of the fake news truth social. Trump invested money on spreading posters proclaiming stolen election while he was the one intending to steal the election. He feigned martyrdom while plotting to put his stranglehold over absolute power. It's been a roller coaster ride, with all markets volatile. Even precious metals were roiled in a fast up and down spike at the end of the week. Still, the trend is more up over time than down. Still, a strong hedge against inflation and political volatility if the people who have been seizing power deliberately defy all conception of what is true goodness of spirit, such as has been inculcated within the Christian church for 2,000 years, then a diabolical twisting of perspectives brings a severe loss of credibility. The leader is not God. People are not obligated to worship nor adhere to his unprincipled lack of moral precepts. We will not allow the panic and the violence to control the vibrations because the love of God is infinitely more sacred and precious to this planet. Stay calm and strong and don't surrender to any wicked abuses online. Relax, meditate, and think straight for a purer, wiser resolution. We have witnessed a criminal organization bidding for absolute power and know that a much larger majority by far are strongly opposed to such a foul move. You do have a country, even if you don't fight like hell. What kind of country is the United States of America? Christianity and democracy have strongly important foundations in the modern day thinking that impel daily actions and activities. Gold rockets past $5,500 as investors pile into safety. Gold hit a fresh record Thursday, briefly touching $5,591 per ounce before settling around $5,542. That's up more than 10% this week alone. What's fueling the surge? Analysts point to mounting U.S. debt and signs the global trade system is fracturing into regional blocs rather than the traditional U.S.-led model. Add in a weaker dollar, steady central bank buying, and rising tensions with Iran and much of Europe, and gold looks less like a crisis hedge and more like essential portfolio insurance. Silver wasn't far behind, climbing toward the $120 mark. The rally has been parabolic and a pullback could be coming, but with the Fed holding rates steady Wednesday and inflation still running hot, analysts expect the fundamentals to remain supportive throughout 2026. Global gold demand hits all-time high in 2025. On Thursday, the World Gold Council reported that global gold demand rose by 1% in 2025 to 5,002 metric tons, the highest number on record. Investment drove the surge. Investment demand surged to 2,175.3 tons compared to 1,185.4 tons in 2024, an 84% jump as investors piled into bars, coins, and ETFs. Meanwhile, jewelry demand dipped by 18% year-on-year against a 67% price increase. However, total spending on gold jewelry still rose to a record $172 billion. Central banks kept buying, led by Poland with 102 tons. The biggest question this year will be whether investment demand is going to be strong enough to maintain the strength of the gold market, analysts said. Not every supposed safe haven is performing as advertised. Bitcoin's digital gold narrative takes a hit. Gold has surged past $5,000 Stocks keep booming, yet Bitcoin is sitting out the action. The original cryptocurrency is hovering around $87,000, down 25% since October, while precious metals hit record highs. Investors have pulled more than $1.3 billion from Bitcoin-linked funds over the last week, and long-time believers are pivoting to equities and gold. The shift exposes a fundamental problem. Bitcoin was marketed as digital gold, but it's behaving like a risk asset. During recent geopolitical tensions, Bitcoin lost 6.6% of its value, while gold rose 8.6%. Analysts say the difference comes down to time horizon. Gold thrives during immediate shocks, tariff threats, policy uncertainty, war risk. Bitcoin, by contrast, is better suited for long-term concerns like fiat debasement that unfold over years, not weeks. For now, physical metals are winning the safe haven trade, and precious metals aren't the only ones surging. Copper surges to record on China trading frenzy. Meanwhile, copper soared as much as 7.9% on the London Metal Exchange to a record high of $14,125 a ton Thursday, marking its biggest daily move since 2009. This time, the rally is being driven by speculation, not fundamentals. Investors are piling into base metals on the Shanghai Futures Exchange on expectations for stronger US growth and more spending on data centers, robotics, and power infrastructure. January was already the busiest month on record for the SHFE's 6 base metals, and other industrial metals like aluminum and zinc also rallied. A weaker dollar is adding fuel, making commodities more attractive globally, but there are plenty of voices warning that the spectacular gains in metals have run ahead of real-world demand. Behind all the metals volatility, the Federal Reserve holds rates steady as power defends independence. The Federal Reserve held its key interest rate steady in a range between 3.5% and 3.75% Wednesday, pausing after 3 consecutive cuts last year. If you look at the incoming data since the last meeting, there is clear improvement in the outlook for growth. Jerome Powell said the labor market is showing signs of stabilization, though core inflation likely hit 3% in December, still well above the Fed's 2% target. 2 officials dissented from Wednesday's decision, with Governors Stephen Miller and Christopher Waller preferring another quarter-point reduction. Powell also defended central bank independence amid mounting pressure from the White House. Markets aren't pricing in another cut until June.
This morning, we'll tell the story of how Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election, and as a result of his loss, decided to wage an attack on our democracy.
He was told time and time again that he did not win the election. Not by Democrats, not by the media, but by his own people.
Giuliani tells Trump, keep fighting. We will have a legal crusade, a political crusade to keep you in power.
This was part of the scheme of getting his supporters sensitized to the fact that there's going to be some fraud here.
Because the only way they're going to win is by a rigged election.
He claimed that the election was rigged in 2012 when Mitt Romney, whom he had endorsed, lost to Barack Obama.
His motive, intent, and plan to obstruct the certification of the 2020 election results and illegitimately retain power.
And he was looking at the TV and he said, "Can you believe I lost to this effing guy?"
His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, went to him after the election was declared. And they didn't just rebut the claims of voter fraud. They explained to him their analysis of why he lost.
The most senior lawyers in your own administration and on your campaign told you that after you'd lost more than 60 legal challenges, that it was over. Why did you ignore them and decide to listen to a new outside group?
Because I didn't respect them.
He used lies to carry out his criminal conspiracy.
The defendant's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans.
The crime is he specifically pushed to derail specific government functions. Lying to the government is not protected by the First Amendment. Obstructing justice is not protected by the First Amendment.
And they think that some fraud happened, and that's how you end up in situations where they're threatening the election officials in Georgia.
Keep opposing the audit, and somebody in your family is going to have a very unfortunate incident.
It has all gone too far. All of it. It has to stop.
Georgia's probably going to be the first state I'm going to blow up, and the Secretary of State need to go with it. Well, for them to say to me, yeah, we just want you to throw out those electors and put in Trump's. I'm thinking, have I gone to another planet?
Trump wants his voters to think that he is fighting against terrible corruption, but he draws in exponential amounts of capital while perpetrating outrageously extreme lies and brazenly deceptive ploys. He was actually involved in taking part in those very things which he inflamed his MAGA base by decrying. He richly deserves the very strongest comeuppance, and it cannot come too soon for millions of people. I usually manage to watch some fantasy-style productions of one kind or another in my week. It's hard, however, to make enough time to put together a detailed critical response, to record my thoughts about the shows I watch, as well as scouring YouTube for relevant, appropriate videos. I also watch Netflix and Amazon Prime for a greater fantasy release with entertainment value and quality of production. So that's a wrap for this week. Look out for next week's exciting episode.